my feeling is when I have abdicated or when I have said, I don't like to get political in my music or in conversations or with my friends and stuff, those started to feel more harmful to me because they were only people of a certain privilege could do that in our society. Some people cannot strip away the thing that makes them political.
There has got to be more than this.
Alex Wong, my old friend. Thanks so much, man, for making a little time for us over here.
Can I move this over here?
Dude, it's a highly choreographed environment that we find ourselves in. So,
thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I feel like we haven't seen each other for a minute. Not for nothing. You're a new dad.
It's true.
You're still new. It's under less than a year.
I think I still qualify.
Little green.
Yeah, as clueless. Yeah, definitely. I hope I get a couple more years at least of that, pulling that card or
milk it for as long as you can.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about that, about how fatherhood has impacted your creative regimen, because you are a lifelong creative. And an admirable one at that. But before we do that, maybe we could just start, and often this is a nice starting point, is the beginning. And what brought you into, I'm going to call it folk music. This is what I call what I do, folk music. And so I hope that you don't mind if I've recklessly affix that label upon you.
I've come to accept the term. I fought it for many years.
What did you prefer?
Oh, all kinds of more pretentious things.
Yeah, no,
but,
for sure.
I think at the root, lyric and craft and like songs that are sturdy are really what fascinates me, and like learning about myself via that medium and that art form, and like studying how to get more of myself into it. Is what's interesting to me and what keeps me going. And I think that's pretty folky.
Yeah, I think that's pretty folky. And I think that aspect of the definition is a critical one. Sometimes the way I put it is like songs from a perspective, but there's something like personal that's presumed among the people like us, I feel like, who set about writing a song, as opposed to somebody who's like, let's write a pop song that anybody could just like
that humans
bop along
feel
to.
This thing. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think I think all the genres have this Venn diagram, overlap, which I think is really interesting. And, I pretentiously would call what I do like cinematic folk, just to try to describe the sort of setting of what's sort of just as solid of a folk song as I can write, with colors and, sonic landscaping, which to me is part of the sort of like, driving at the lyric of the song through these other, you have all these other tools to use as well when you're recording. But I find genres like Americana, I'm still like scratching my head about that one, because sometimes I feel like that it's so close to what I do, and yet something about the lineage of it, or something about the, sometimes I feel I am that. Sometimes I feel I am sort of this, weird stepchild of that, or not. It's not quite it wasn't quite in my lineage, or it's not in my bones in a certain way. And then sometimes I feel like it's a visual genre where it's like I close my eyes and I hear a song that is labeled Americana, and it sounds exactly like something maybe I would feel is a home base for me. Yet we sometimes listen with our eyes, and there is a look, or there's other elements to what I would classify as like Americana artists, and sometimes it feels nebulous. So
Yeah.
I
think it is the most nebulous of genres, the Americana one, maybe on purpose by design, or maybe by just people who can't fit in anywhere else. Kind of find themselves somewhat at home. I totally agree, though, and if I were to hazard a guess as to why Americana isn't quite the right label, and I'll just speak for myself, is that it's a little too like beer holly. It's a little too party time. It's a little too band forward for me to really feel comfortable in it. It's a little, and what I'm trying to not say, but I'll just say it. It's like a little bit too fun for what I do. I think, and I mean that seriously. There's a part of what I do and the kind of music that I really like. You could put it one way, it's like kind of concert type of music. It's sit down music. It's like you want to sit down and sit. You want the room to be quiet so you can hear the words, and you can hear like every last nuance in the singer's voice or the playing of the instrument. Or it's a really like a listening music as opposed to like something you meet your friends for a social occasion at. And lots of people go to music for that reason, like the music's part of it. The band is so fun, whatever, you can sing along and thing. But I find that the kind of music...
You hate it when your listeners have fun.
So. I hate it. I always have. There was I'm kidding. Obviously, please come to my shows and have a great time, however you see fit. And when I was in my 20s, I had this bluegrass band, the Barbed Wire Cutters. And it was like why I got to take a chance at playing music. The band was, the live show was really good. I was very fortunate. Everybody in that band was more talented than me. Story of my life. But we put on a great live show, and I was just like, why are all these people dancing? Like, just like watch the pickers, man. The show's the pickers. And
did you admonish the crowd?
I had the sense not to. I had the sense to keep my mouth shut on that rare occasion. But it's just like, it's something, even the podcast, the artists that are on this podcast these seem to be like more concert forward. Recently had an artist, Robert Ellis, maybe you know him. And while he toured a long time with a very excellent band and played loud shows, now he's just like solo guy. And I think that show is the show to see because that's where he shines. It's like, he's a masterful musician.
Yeah, I think it's been an ongoing and a long journey for me in terms of finding home musically in what we're talking about. I mean, I have to be honest, like I don't always feel at home in the, in the Americana world that sometimes I feel like we often get classified in or pushed in or something. I think
especially in Nashville.
Yeah, and I don't always feel the most acceptance from that world here as well. And also there's something that I'm still unpacking as far as like sometimes I'm like, I love and respect what I'm hearing, but I don't feel a connection to a DNA. It's not something that's coming from deep in my bones. It's not something that I like, there isn't my family through line or my, it's not a cultural, I'm not building upon a cultural legacy or something like that. And sometimes I feel like, what is, that's a much bigger question that I've been, wrestling with is like, what is your cultural American music sound like? What is all of that? And sometimes it feels like, when I'm at Americana Fest or something, it feels like cosplay in a way, like, and this is, much love to all my Americana friends and family and fans and everything. But yeah, sometimes it feels like a little bit of an ill-fitting suit. And I'm still figuring out why that is, and trying to unpack that and ask questions inward and kind of look outward for that. And at the same time, coming to Nashville, I think I was always very interested in the song. I think it started with the people, the Paul Simons and the Tom Pettys and the Rufus Wainwrights and Leonard Cohen and such. But I think going through the sort of like New York, that's where I landed first, where I felt like I first figured out a point of view or figured out sort of, I started that journey of what am I saying? What am I expressing? And I felt there was a lot more stuff I was interested in terms of like body listening. So, I always loved a tight song, but I also loved the visceral aspect of, electronic music and, indie rock and sort of these other genres where there was a little more, they weren't having fun, don't worry. But you're absorbing music on a few levels, not just the like listening to the lyric intellectual level, but your body is reacting to the instrumentation or the beat or the rhythms and I love all of that, and I'm still figuring out where, taking that and then coming here where it was, I feel like I became more song focused and, and maybe in the fact that I'm touring more solo now and the influences of this great community and people who are very into the craft of the song, that became, that sort of almost became the dominant method of communication almost. And so I'm still like, what my dream is that plus this other aspect where you could live remix something of a folk song with the tools to have an instrumental break that goes for 20 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm that's where I am currently experimenting with this, like, could you build this spaceship that can play a listening room, so to speak, or play a place that would be, venue that's friendly for people who like folk music, but also take them on this journey. We don't have to make them dance, but like, let their minds wander, or let them kind of go into a meditative state in parts, or, and also be able to be a little more interactive with the crowd. And if that crowd isn't wanting that, then you don't do it. But if it's like there is opportunity to stretch out a section or create a soundscape or something, it would be really fun to do that in this world.
I feel like there's an overlap in song and performance that Americana doesn't. It's not forward thinking in this way, as opposed to what I'm just gonna clumsily call the New York scene. While you're talking, I was thinking about like David Byrne, Talking Heads, 80s, very
performative,
clever songs, but like it was of a piece of a larger thing.
Yeah.
The suits, the dancers, his whole career has been like music and song deliverance as performance was as part of the thing. As opposed here, it's like pure song. Get a guitar, play that song.
And almost sometimes pure lyric, like almost chord progression being
who cares?
A distant second to the lyric.
100%.
Which, I think for me, chord progression was my first on-ramp to enjoying music. And I remember giving my first girlfriend this mixtape, which I was like, these songs are so amazing. And she was like, are you trying to break up with me? Because I did not pay any attention to the lyrics. I was just like, that chord progression is rad.
Yeah.
And why aren't you crying hearing that, And so, yeah, I think I'm just in this phase of like really exploring all these different on-ramps that different people experience to music. And can you offer more of those in this world that I guess we inhabit, the folk music world? Yeah,
I mean, it's funny because there's a reason why those chords are so simple. Like every Taylor Swift song is 1-4-6-5, 1-6-4-5, 1, in whichever order.
She mixes up the numbers in different orders.
She mixes up the numbers, but she doesn't do any other numbers, and that's not anything against it. Nothing is on accident in her world, and she's doing pretty good. But why that is that it doesn't ask much of the listener's ear. Everybody can plug immediately into that song. It doesn't challenge you, let's say.
Yeah, and they can feel safe with
absolutely.
that part.
It's familiar.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. That's part of the reason why that music is so successful. But it's also why weirdos like you and me and half the people that are on this podcast have been drawn toward chords of a surprising nature, let's say chords that insert themselves into your attention span while you're listening to the song.
And I guess if you're interested in exploring a spectrum emotionally, which I feel like we aspire to in our writing, and sort of uncovering stuff that doesn't always feel comfortable or is like a different color out of the primary colors, then I think those chords really help in that.
The new chords, let's just call them.
Yeah,
the surprising chord.
Yeah, it's just
the inharmonic.
They're
chord.
just a different emotional color, and it's like if you use them deliberately, it's just another great tool.
I feel like it is a more sophisticated approach to songwriting, and I don't mean that in a snobby sense. I just mean it in a more complicated and deliberate sense. And I think that for many songwriters, and I'd just like to get your take on that. The chords are really just kind of the plate on which the food is served, and the food being the lyric and maybe the melody. But it's not the music is just there almost to be invisible. The chordal underlying structure is there to be as invisible as possible.
In the folk
in this folk and
universe.
Americana, the country world, this part of this universe that I definitely touch on.
Yeah, I think it's all about, are you being deliberate in the choice? Like, I think sometimes someone like Dylan, who writes a 18-verse ballad or something, and the chords are so repetitive because he wants them to disappear at a certain point in your brain, and then the story, he can start to craft this, crazy twist or whatever. And I think when you hear a 1/4 song, and it's used on purpose so that the chords either take a backseat or disappear at a certain point, that's pretty cool as a tool. And then if they change it at a certain point where they want you to perk up and pay attention, they change it on a lyric or something like that. I mean, I think those things are really, I love, those are like thrilling moments to me. And so like, I would say I'm chord agnostic as far as like a song doesn't have to have a minimum or maximum number of chords to be great, but I like when the artist is being deliberate with that tool. So like, I do hear songs here where it's like, okay, I need a bed to write this lyric on, so I'm just going to go for the default chord progression or something like that. And that's a little less compelling to me when it doesn't sound like it's not bespoke to the song. It's just kind of like, it's like a Logic template or something like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I find myself, why I'm drawn to what I'm drawn toward as opposed to something else, is I've never been terribly enamored with the wildly connective or successful pop or country song, because there was no person at the center of it. And I've always, like Leonard Cohen, on the other hand, there's always a Leonard Cohen inside every Leonard Cohen song. And that is what I'm attracted to. And it's weird. I think that you kind of can't on some level choose your like first principles level of inspiration. And when I was coming up, my buddy was, his parents were huge Beatles fans. So there's Beatles music playing. My parents did not like music, so I had to go elsewhere for any sort of influence whatsoever. And I liked the Beatles songs because they were so clever and catchy, all the things that people love about the Beatles songs. But what I really liked was Neil Young. Like the first time I heard a Neil Young song, I just liked how crooked it was, and it didn't quite line up, but it absolutely felt like this guy is singing this song and nobody else could sing this song. And of course then people do make covers of it, but it's always a Neil Young song. And I'm like, that's what I want to chase, is is like a song from her perspective.
Yeah, I hear that as energy. It's like that frequency of that person, or the energy pre-music. It's like Neil Young could play any progression, it would sound like Neil Young, because he's infusing his spirit, his kind of like fuck you attitude, and his kind of like just his grittiness, and all of the things go in there somewhere. And so he can play he can play 1/4 progression, and it will just be like that. It's got his spirit in it,
Yeah.
And like, I've been really trying to like practice that more, like listening to people's spirit, and not being like, oh, I like, they were clever there, or they were, they did this, they did some cool math rock there or something, but like, what's their frequency, and am I resonating with that frequency, and where in my body am I resonating with it? And
here's a oblique angle. But I've just been reading this this kind of survey of history book lately, and came across something about the Japanese tea ceremony. And one of the big, a man named Senro, and I don't have his name right. He's long passed, so he won't hold it against me. But he was kind of the one who was like credited with bringing the Japanese tea ceremony to like perfection, and the ethos behind that was so interesting, because it was all about effortlessness and transparency, and on a really refined level. For instance, he apocryphally, I'm sure, but visited this man's house, this nobleman's house, who wanted to have him over, the great tea ceremony master, for tea. And he approached, and there was just this like ornate, crazy cool gate at the front of his house. And his helper commented that like, oh, it made the house feel so like wonderfully lonely. And the tea master saw through it and saw that like this gate, the man had to go to such great lengths to go find this gate in some dark corner of the woods and have it all brought here and presented to him. And it was just like he saw through the gesture and the all of the effort that went into it, and it was just like crass to him. It was too much. And that's like a really I remember it because it was like a kind of a subtle and in my eyes, like original perspective on I think that we usually kind of love to see the labor that's put into something. And now like in Instagram, it's all process videos and stuff. And this aesthetic comes from a completely different side of it. It's just like make that as invisible as possible, make it as effortless as possible.
I have definitely been guilty of making the gate in both songwriting and in production in the past. And I would say I aspire to make the gate invisible now. That's what's interesting to me. And I think that comes from letting go of my need for the cool kids to approve of something or some certain external to give me the check mark or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think I have definitely been guilty in the past of writing something with, just cumbersome chords because I want to impress some unknown, nebulous entity out there, or stuffing my production with, how cool I can be or something like that, where, I think it's all process. I've made those mistakes. I hope that now I make less of those mistakes. Mm-hmm. I think you refine your compass more as you make stuff. And what I really like now, I think when I was making a lot of gates, it was because at my core, I didn't trust my ability to generate yet. Like ideas in the spot, or be in the moment and generate ideas, especially in the studio as a producer. So I would have ideas on the ready, or I would pre-save ideas or something like that, because I never wanted to get caught with my pants down and be like, oh, I don't have the solution to this problem that we're facing. Mm-hmm. But of course, that can be very stifling and sort of take everyone out of the actual moment that's happening. And I think now my favorite thing is going into sessions, going into work on records with people with like nothing. Like, in fact, so much so that, you've been to my studio with the chalkboards, walls and everything, and it's like erase everything is blank, and we are both in a reactive state where we are able to react and have fun in the not knowing and have fun exploring and discovering, instead of me having this burden or ego burden of having to come up with all the cool ideas or whatever. And I think that both in that and in songwriting, I think as I felt like maybe I got more confidence in my skills, I could go in with more of a blankness and be like, the solution we'll get it.
Will come.
Trust. Yeah, it'll be there.
Yes.
And then if it doesn't, it's not my fault either. Like, I don't have to feel shame over this and take that on in this really dark way, which I have done in the past.
That makes me want to crack this open and see how comfortable you are talking about it. But one thing, I have a love-hate relationship with Enneagram stuff. I found it to be helpful, but I also find it incredibly irritating when people love to talk about what number they are and why at infinitum. But I remember in a past conversation I've had with you that you're a 6. Is that still fair to say? Do you think you're still in there?
I would say.
And what is it? There's the six that is like does the opposite thing of their feet, and it's like, it got a name.
Yeah. Here we go. The 6 is the loyalist, and I think each number has a driver. And I think the reason it was hard for me to identify with that number was because there was a lot of outward behaviors in myself that I identified with, which sounded more like a 3. But the driver at the root of those behaviors was fear. And it's not, I think when I first read that or interpreted it, I took it to be like, you are a fearful person, or I was like, well, no, I'm not, and that's exactly what a 6 would do. And it's just recognizing what's sort of like the driver guiding these decisions. And so, what you're talking about was like counterphobic 6.
That's it. Yes.
So like some 6s sort of lean into that fear. So they're kind of decision paralysis and sort of, because 6s look out into the world to understand themselves and the world. So we're really perceptive at seeing people, seeing their, them really on a deep level. And we're very sensitive to what people are thinking, what they're feeling, but we also block off our own intuition in favor of other people's, thoughts and feelings and opinions, because we're afraid of abandonment, or we're afraid of whatever that thing at the root is, and we want them to like us, or that's the 6's journey, is to like start to block out the noise of everyone else in the world and start to trust that inner voice, to your intuitive voice, and that's certainly been true for me. And in the counterphobic 6 we were talking about, sort of like overcompensates in the world, so puts on a
tell that story about the bridge in Hawaii.
Yeah, I would do stuff like that. Like I was into skateboarding and snowboarding and action things,
thrill-seeking sports,
and I jumped off this really tall bridge in Hawaii, which was definitely not sorry mom and dad who are listening. Just sort of thrill-seeking stuff that would make me would say I did this, so I'm a brave person, or and those are those things that would like be like, well, okay, I did that, I can feel like that type of person, but underneath it, you're still trying to fill this void with these behaviors and doing things that are daring or doing things that are bold, because it feels it's sort of not supported by the right foundation yet.
It's still like considering an outside point of view.
Yeah, like
you're
what's this going to look
yourself.
like,
yes,
or
exactly.
Even to myself, just what's it going to look like to myself, and so
that's
and
heady.
I can justify, I can assuage those fears because look, I did this brave thing, or look, I taught whatever it may be. So yeah, man, that journey and my time in Nashville has really feels very hand in hand, and like I think I was thinking before we sat down about the part of my career that's happened in Nashville, and how in a funny way now that we are surrounded by the sort of multitudes of people who are doing similar things, you're finally a normie, you're finally like your job is normal.
Nobody here asks you when you're going to get a real job,
yeah,
or like the annoying things that happen everywhere else.
It's been really interesting to me that my personal journey in music here has felt more inward. It's like, because now there's all these opportunities to collaborate and to do all these projects with everybody, it almost felt like it pushed me to discover those things, those intuitive voices more, or maybe it brought to light that I needed those in order to go forward, because there was more times where I was running up against things that felt like they started to feel inauthentic, or they started to feel like crutches or something like that. So
I noticed that from my journey here in Nashville, I too am most inclined to the solo act of creation. And I think that's what you're saying to me. And maybe not.
I'll expand on it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say for myself, I would rather write a song by myself. I'm working on writing prose or otherwise is pretty much a task of one, and I'm most comfortable in that scenario. And that said, probably the songs that I've co-written are the ones that have had more commercial appeal and impact. But I just find it like it's a lot easier for me to be me when it's just me. Surprise, surprise. And whereas when I'm working with somebody else, I will always there's a little caretaker in me. I want to make sure that they're comfortable, and I'm like serving them. Almost all my co-writes feel like I'm trying to help somebody else facilitate their thing, which is fun, but it doesn't ever feel like my song as much.
Totally. Yeah.
And part of the reason for this podcast that I have really enjoyed and has been really fulfilling is that I somehow get this opportunity to like kind of get inside the heads of some of these friends and heroes, and in a way that's like somehow more intimate and authentic than trying to write a song, and meaningful, I guess. But I'm also, I think that my quest right now is to be more outward going, more outward seeking. I think I need to be doing more co-writes because it makes me uncomfortable, because I'm afraid of it, because I'm definitely a person who I like to do, like, I think this is typical of writers, is that you do all of your messy, ugly stuff behind closed doors, and not until the thing is polished and ready to be seen do the curtains part and you present the deal. And, you know, like my whole career has been that way. I love that. Like, nobody sees the sweat. And I think but that manifests itself too in a co-write where you can't not be ugly. You can't not fail in front of somebody, even if it's one person. And that vulnerability is something that I don't think I'll ever be comfortable with, but I think it's really important to my own humility and personal growth.
Yeah. I love that everyone's coming from a different starting point. I think I feel like a very, late bloomer. Someone should write a song about it. At this point in certain parts of my career, and then in other parts don't match up. Like certain parts of my career, I would say were much further along than other parts. And sometimes that was hard to figure out, hard to identify first. When I came here, I think I had been doing a lot of collaborations, a lot of co-writes, a lot of producing other people, sideman stuff, and my own things. But it was in this funny jumble where, I had landed here after lots of transitional stuff in my personal life, and there was just like a big break, and then it was almost like a starting anew. And I think my image, it was difficult to understand, to get an objective view of where I was, so to speak. Like that, I knew there were things I wanted to do, there were things I had done, I had accomplished certain things in as a producer or as a musician in general, and then I also had been putting off a lot of stuff in terms of what I wanted to do or be as a solo artist, or even knowing that I wanted to be a solo artist or that I needed to explore that. And so it's like sometimes parts of your career are very far along, and then other parts you're a baby. And understanding that and accepting the babiness was really important for me. So I wasn't like, I shouldn't be having to do this shit gig or whatever. Like I've got all these accolades, but it's like different. And it's like, for me, it was like really, I had to really weed through that internally and be like, no, you are starting from the beginning. If you want to go down this road to find out what it is that you're, trying to express as a solo artist and writer, take the open mics, do the, start at the beginning and start learning. And so I feel like the last few years and most of my time here has started to be that, while still
keeping
participating in the other parts of my music career, but being more and more honest and being like, okay, actually this is what is lighting me up. This is what my soul and my personal growth feels like it's here, even though this is where all my cool career stuff is, or, and like having to be honest about that and be honest about like, well, right now co-writing doesn't feel that fulfilling. It feels like a crutch. It feels like I can do this in my sleep, but it's not. What's hard for me is sitting in a room by myself until I get the song, and not leaning on calling a friend or, phoning a friend or whatever, and really getting an accurate expression of the thing that I need to express. That's where my part of the journey, I feel like was. And so that was the most uncomfortable thing for me to start doing. And now it's like, I'm like, I currently don't want to, I only want to write alone at the moment. And, everything is in seasons, and we kind of go in and out of these seasons. That's the season that feels right at this moment. And so I think, Nashville has so many opportunities for comparison and for rating where you are in the ecosystem and the food chain and all that, that it almost, maybe that's what pushed me to go so far internally, and to be like, well, that's a never ending, and you're never going to get the answer.
You won't win that game
who
ever.
You are by using those metrics. And that's what the 6 wants to do. But what I needed to do was find the metrics that were internal and that were my, intuitive voice, and start to build that up and build up that connection. So ironically, that's what Nashville has been a learning ground for me for.
Awesome. Now let's come back and talk about fatherhood and its implications on that journey. How old is your young?
She'll be 6 months on, what's today, the 12th, 13th, 12th. I have no idea. Anyway, she'll be 6 months, like in a day or two.
Amazing. And the routine is relentless. And I'm guessing,
like the keeping the baby alive routine.
Yes, that routine.
It is, but it's also fun, and it's not nearly what the horror stories that I heard made me think it was going to be.
What did you think it was going to be versus what it?
Well, I guess from watching some, like bad movies, or hearing people who are just exhausted telling you about their experience or something, I was like, oh yeah, life's over. Or like, people are literally saying to you, life is over. And that's also can be true. I think for some people, it's such a, you get to really define this part of life. And I probably the entire parenthood experience, but especially this baby part, I feel like so many people do it so differently. And so we got to choose the way that felt good for us. And also I have like the most kick-ass partner who is like supportive and then some. So she makes it way easier than it could be.
I wonder, this is a bit off the cuff, but if there's some virtue in being an old dad, which I think I can start to say that I'm about to be, is that it's not for
yourself, Corbin.
It's not like, sorry. It's not like when you're, I think when you're 24 and you're still kind of figuring out if this is a thing that you're going to be doing, music, creative life, all the uncertainty or not. There's lots of people at 24 that are chasing the creative life. There's a lot fewer at 34 and even fewer at 44. And those who've made that third turn, let's say, that's kind of what you are. And you find a partner that accepts you on those terms, I think, because you can't change at that point. It's not like you're going to go to grad school anymore.
I could definitely see tensions arising when there is a certain idea of what it will be like, and then that idea is different in practice. Like if somebody hasn't established that their life is about, creating, or that they haven't been established in their routine or their career or their job as a creative person, and you're still trying to establish those routines while establishing routines as a parent and a partnership, I can definitely see that is that can be challenging. And I have seen that with friends and people that I know where it seems really challenging to decide who gets that limited bandwidth to invest in themselves and their career and their heart's calling, as well as all the other responsibilities. So I feel like lucky to be an old dad and to be in a partnership. It's not that I actively pushed away at this life, both having a life partner and a kid, but I certainly didn't find the right situation and find the right match until now. So I feel like that was the most important part to me, to be able to thrive with all of with the creative life and everything, and still feel like I have this real like I feel like I can accomplish more now, and I feel excited about the things that I can plan and accomplish now with this stable foundation than I even before, when I was single and like unencumbered, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. The right partnership is so clutch. I feel like I won the lottery in that department after many failed attempts.
Yeah, I'm glad there's
failure to the point of giving up. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty long in the tooth, man, when old Randy came by. And also, daughters can be sources of inspiration, and I think that you wrote a song recently.
Yeah, I did find that once August was born, there was a lot of creative energy happening, and I had just struggled with there was another podcast, they mean nothing to me, that asked me to write a song, and I really struggled for many days to write this song. Eventually I feel happy with what I got, but it was like there was just a lot of like creative, hard labor happening. And then as soon as I wrote that song, I would say in the next 20 minutes, this other song came out in the same channel, and that's this one that I will share with you. And so I think she's kind of sending me some material.
What's the name of it?
I think it's While Your Heart Is Still Brand New.
A nice long title. I love long titles. Yeah, man, let's try to give it a whirl here in the studio.
All right, sounds good. 2, 3. While your heart is still brand new, you can look up at the moon. You can see the secret message that it's hiding. You don't have to tell a soul, it's just for you to know. You can share it every time you feel like smiling. Hello, 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 hello. We've been waiting for so long to meet you. I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know how much this grown-up world is gonna need you. While your heart is still brand new, we will all look up to you. Can you show us all the things that we've forgotten? Like the way your breathing slows when you see that greenish glow every time the sunset sinks into the ocean. Hello, 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 hello. We've been waiting for so long to meet you. I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know how much this crazy world is gonna need you. Hello, 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 hello. We've been waiting for so long to meet you. I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know how much this grown-up world is gonna need you. While your heart is still brand new, while it only hears the truth, and my words, they're only messing up the meaning. I will hum this melody, so you'll always know it's me. I will sing it into your ear while you are dreaming.
Well, that was great, dude. Nice whistling all around, everybody. And actually a really beautiful song, man. And like that song, I think once in a while, something that's from your personal perspective has a universal appeal. That doesn't happen all the time. And I feel like that's really happening in that song. I thought that on first listen. So thanks for letting me join you.
Long title and all.
Oh, dude, I only write in long titles anymore. I think it's great.
As long as you say the long title 4 or 5 times in the song, then
You can get away with it.
you can hammer it home.
Nobody knows the names of songs anyway. They just are like tracks.
Yeah, man. That's fun.
Cool. Okay, well, for our last installment, let's talk about this. And I'm a little uncomfortable talking about it, but I think that might be helpful. You should go at things that are uncomfortable. But we had like an exchange on Instagram about a year ago, and I felt attacked in this exchange. And it's like me, I never have that feeling with people. And I noticed that it's like in my personality, I'm not a combative person. I don't like to argue. I don't like to win. And but it was in the wake of the terrible tragedy involving the Covenant School shooting that happened in Nashville last May. And I had some feelings about it, and I made a post about it. And then I thought the post was just really, I wasn't really like a side taker or whatever. But do you remember this exchange? But first of all,
yeah.
And so what was your take on that? And let's hash it out for a second. I'm just kind of curious.
Sure. Well, I'm sorry you felt attacked.
Thank you. No,
I didn't. That my intention was not to attack at all. I wrote to you privately so that it wouldn't seem like I was like attacking for clout or like trying to get the mob, anger the mob or anything like that. But I felt that I just felt like as a friend I needed to like be honest about how that post made me feel. And I wanted to know more about where it was coming from, I guess, and kind of where you were coming from. And I think, as we always are doing, I think we're always sort of seeing everything in the world at that time through the lens of what we are personally wrestling with, learning about. And should we are we taping, or should we recap this episode, or are we?
Yeah, no, I think it's worth talking about, because I don't think that neither of us is particularly combative, and I think that this is more of like a process of understanding. And I'm as you talk, I'm kind of remembering more about what I wrote and what I was feeling, and maybe I could articulate that. And which was, this terrible thing happens. The school gets shot up. Kids are killed, murdered, and a couple of adults are murdered. And it's just, I felt, as we all felt, just like horrible. And then really quickly, there was this. It became a political thing. It became an opportunity to score points for and against an agenda. This is how I took it. And this is how I often see political motions of any kind, and why I'm not a terribly political person. I don't think I'm right in that. I think it's just like the way that I handle things. I think that's partly the result of this thing that I have, where I just can see people's perspectives, both sides, on almost every issue. And so at the ground issue for me was that, like, these kids had been killed, and that no one, really quickly, people didn't even care about that. Nobody knew the names of even the little kids, or it would just became like, fuck Republicans kind of thing. And I was just like, what about the kids? Like, that was kind of the heart of the post, that what was driving it. And I think so, but you took it as, I think, like an abdication of responsibility. And I think that's what you were challenging me on
about all of this. But I think,
does that ring a bell, or
I think
emotionally?
That what it emotionally struck me, and I'll back up and kind of try to give a little more context to where I was coming from. But yeah, I think it struck me as a moment of privilege to be able to be apolitical. I think one thing over this, another thing that Nashville has taught me that comes from a lot of examination, a lot of unpacking, especially even in music, having come up and mostly, engaging with a white-dominated section of the industry in terms of folk music, in terms of singer-songwriter music. I think there was a long time where I didn't see, I guess I could say I didn't see color in a way, but I didn't understand that what I was missing in terms of, like, even my heroes, even the songs that I loved, I connected to them on a certain level, and on a certain level, I was always missing my story in them, and missing my representation in my heroes and the people in my community, and why I guess ignoring the fact that I was always either the token or the only, or one of very few Asians in this community. And I think what Nashville brought out to me was the realization that you can't see, like, color blindness doesn't exist, at least for me. And that seeing things, saying that you don't see color, or for me, saying that, is almost a harmful, it's harmful because it's an erasure of something that is very plainly there. And so if I have to assimilate into a white culture, and basically push away this other part of my story or not talk about certain parts of my story in order to fit in or in order to interact with this culture of singer-songwriter music, it feels, it became more pointed that you cannot separate out your lived experience, especially in the body that we live life and absorb experiences through. And it became more, stark here. It's ironic that I think that I started going down a lot of this unpacking of cultural identity here in Nashville, where there were very few Asians compared to other places that I've lived. But I guess when there's a vacuum, humans tend to fill it and start to open those parts of yourself.
If I might insert really quickly, just to be clear, nothing of the post was about color.
I know, I'm getting there.
Okay.
But what this has kind of gotten me to see was that also the idea of separating what people call political things. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there is a separation. I don't think we can afford that separation anymore. And my feeling is when I have abdicated or when I have said, I don't get political, or I don't like to get political in my music or in conversations or with my friends and stuff. Those started to feel more harmful to me because they were only people of a certain privilege could do that in our society. Some people cannot strip away the thing that makes them political, if it is race or if it is, their sexual orientation or whatever. They can't turn it on and off in order to fit into a certain company or to code switch into another community. And so for people who have that privilege, I've started to feel that you have to be really careful with it and treat it heavily. Like it is to be able to say, you know what, right now I'm just going to go outside and look at the sunshine and ignore this, or just to turn and focus on something else. That is not an option for everybody. And I think that was the part of the post that was felt hurtful.
I think that's fair and reasonable, and it's something I do think about a lot. My fortune, and let me come at it from this angle, which is that yes, I don't like to be combative, and I don't like to pick sides, and I tend to focus on things that draw people together rather than things that tear people apart. And saying that, I know that I have to be very careful. It's really easy for me to sit at this house and make my podcast and write my songs and not participate in things that don't directly affect me. And that is, I think, a misappropriation of my, I'll say, privilege. And so I am careful about it. And in that context, I actually, Rand and I talked about it for a long time, and we ended up hosting a fundraiser at our house and raised a bunch of money for Voices for a Safer Tennessee, a gun policy advocating company. And so, and for me, that was consistent with who I felt that I was and what I had to offer the world, as opposed to gathering at the courthouse or whatever, which I'm not entirely comfortable with. I actually went to one of those. I went to the memorial service. There was 2 that week, and the one, it was I'm just gonna be candid and be like, Jill Biden was there, and it was like a who's who of several Americana artists that were standing on stage next to her, and everyone looking dutifully mournful. But on the part of me that just left me cold, and now I'm remembering lit a fire in me that made me want to write something, was that it just felt so opportunistic of all of these people. This terrible thing happened, these kids died, and then it's somebody's getting public visibility for their musical career in this moment. And I recognize that I don't know what's in their hearts, and so that's why I'm not calling them out by name. But it's it's undeniable that it was an opportunity to be publicly visible, and there's a self-elevation in that. I just really have a hard time with that, And that's just me, I'm not saying I'm right in that. But so that's the spirit that was coming out of that now. I remember. I think that we do live in a different time, and Rand and I talk about this stuff a lot. The color blindness side of it, which has nothing to do with a post, but since you brought it up, I think it's really important. And I don't think that you can ignore the fact that color exists. I think that's an irresponsible position to take, whatever your ethnic background is. However, I think that there is a valid question, that is to what extent should race play in your own self-awareness and in the awareness of others. And there's tons of literature on that. There's a guy I follow that I like a lot named Coleman Hughes, who just has a pretty strong position on color blindness. He's an African-American thinker. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. Do you know him? He's like kind of banging in the intellectual circles right now. But I think that question is really valid. In something that I worry about in culture in America today is that there does seem to be this like retribalization along racial lines of American life. And I think that is to its detriment. Yeah, I think that's like I kind of come to a full stop on that, because this podcast isn't about that stuff.
Well, it doesn't have to not be about it. I'm just, I think it's a journey. I think I've definitely been, I've made a lot of, mistakes on my end. I've like, bumbled into, hot takes or things that later I've cringed about, or in my process of learning about this. But I think I'm hearing what you're saying about going and sort of having a negative reaction to people who you might interpret as opportunistic in a moment that needs to have been about these children and the tragedy that happened. I think, if I'm remembering, from the post, what I felt was like, you don't have to, it's great that you guys did a fundraiser, and I think it's great that people have different ways of showing up, but I think the point is like, show up and don't. It felt disrespectful to what happened as well, I don't remember the every detail of the post, but it was kind of like, look, just go outside and take a deep breath and look at the sunshine or something like that. Mm-hmm. I'm maybe misinterpreting, but I
can't remember that particular line,
but like, just think about something else, or just be happy. And that felt wrong in that moment.
I don't think I was saying that, but if that's that made it, it's all everybody. It's on my Instagram feed, and it's just probably the only one that's just all words, and so anyone can find it and tell me what I wrote.
And like, I mean, I feel how I feel. Other artists, I'm sure, have completely different feelings about what the responsibility of artists are today, which I think is different than another time maybe. But I get sad when people are able to ignore what is happening and not take a stand. You don't have to necessarily take a stand in the exact same way, but I think it's also easy to ignore these days, and because we live in this super bubble of privilege. And it's not just racial privilege, but it's, our societal privilege and whatever. But I just think I want to live up to more responsibility, I guess, as an artist who has whatever small, minuscule platform I have. I think that there is a duty to it, that is not just make songs that are... we're also humans. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is we can't separate those things. We can't separate the color and blindness. We can't separate the fact that we are political animals, and we can't separate our human experience from our art, at least in the type of art that we're proposing to make as this honest, authentic, type of songs, and so I think there's I would like. I'm not sure how to articulate what I want to articulate. At this
No, I think
point,
I
think that we need to do more, and we need to show up more as more of ourselves. And it's hard, and it's uncomfortable, and people will hate on you, and you might, we will not always be able to have comfortable, polite conversations. And I think that seeking out comfortable, polite conversations is going to hold us back in this time.
I think it's a wonderfully open question as to what responsibility art has to something outside itself. And I think on one hand, I tend to go to the side of art is essentially useless, and thereby perhaps the most important thing in the world. And I think that there's another argument, and maybe you're voicing this one, which is that art should be directed towards something outside itself, maybe something that could help the world in a positive way. And I think that's equally valid. And we're all trying to do something between perhaps those two polarities that is, I hope at the end of the day, authentic to us. And there's room for everybody.
I'd like there to be, yes.
Dude, we're at an hour, and we could talk about this for a very long time. And I really appreciate you coming in and talking with us and playing. And I really appreciate this part of this conversation because it's something that I don't talk about very often, and I would do well to think on perhaps more than I do. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Thanks for having me.
And now let's actually play the song.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What if I could learn to fly in swirling clouds across the sky? You are soaring next to me. I am free when you are free. What if I could learn to sing a stranger's foreign melody? Hear your heart in every beat. I am free when you are free. Only God can understand where I stop and you begin. Giant shapes, too big to see. I feel the murmur in the breeze. I am free when you are free. What if I could learn to fight the fear that makes me choose a side? I can feel it when you bleed. I am free when you are free. Only God can understand where I stop and you begin. Giant shapes, too big to see. I feel the murmur in the breeze. I am free when you are free. What if I could learn to see that your blood flows inside of me like a river to the sea? I am free when you are free. Like a river to the sea, I am free when you are free.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video, or click here to watch a playlist featuring the songs of the Morse Code podcast. Okay, thank you very much.